as a parent and also just somebody who needed a mentor at the time. So there was this day where John, he'd come up to me and he'd have all this he was like a big brother. I had just lost my father, to a heart attack, very unexpectedly. And I think I just needed like that. John had just this unapologetic, masculine, almost bored, macho type of like, hey man, this is what we're gonna do. And he came up to me in this one moment and he said, hey man, if you I'm just kind of curious, if you only had like three setups to do this scene, how would you do it? And of course I'm young and I'm like, I need nine. That's how I do it. I need like this, I need that, I need this, I need it close. And he's like, yeah, man, we're gonna do all that. We're gonna do all that. But, I'm just thinking like John Ford shit. I'm just thinking about like, if you had to do these mini masters, you know what I'm saying? These mini masters, like if you had to do it like all in one shot, like how would you, I'm just kind of curious, like how would you do it? Would you like just three shots? And I'd be like, okay. And you guys probably know this shot if I can tell it to you, but it's when DJ begins to rap kind of for the first time. And Anthony Anderson's character is not really happy with him, just going like, hey man, we want to get radio play. But it begins kind of in the corner of the room in this wide shot. And then as he begins to rap, we slowly start moving to the left, and we get them in this kind of like apex triangle, shot with DJ on the left side of the screen, Key on the right side, Shelby in the center. And I said, well, I guess I could do something like that. And then maybe just if I had just two angles, then I would just go one on Anthony and then one on Terrence. And I mean, if you put a gun to my head, he goes, yeah, man, just gun to your head. So John went off and I'm planning out my 9 shots. And then John goes, hey man, I did the best I could, but like we only got time for those 3 shots, and but you know what it is now, man. You know what it is, and isn't that great? And now every time I see that, I'm just filled with such gratitude on 2 levels. The first bit of gratitude is, it's better. It's better. I think we're coming into a very television age where you shoot everything and you cut a bunch of talking heads, and there's no real like time to just linger within a frame that people are living in. Just 3 people just living in a frame, and movement is so slow that you can barely even see it. And then the second bit of gratitude was that he did it that way. He came up and he engaged me first as like a creative, and then told me, you're out of your mind if you think we're going to get 9 setups and make our day, and that relationship. I remember Amy and I being in coloring with Walter, and hey there, and it was kind of the first time that Amy and I had like a moment to talk about like what we just went through. Because it was tough. I mean, it was inspiring, but we were just running and gunning and with very little money. And I remember this one day where Amy said, I've been watching you just frame by frame in this, and it meant a lot to me. There was this moment where she said, I really began to see what you're doing. And I know there were some days where we were, everybody's trying to like get ideas, but there was like a 3 shot of like Nola coming into the frame and saying, I want to lay one down, D, and then it moves up to Shelby and then goes over to Anthony. And as much as when you're young and you think like, oh, that shot shouldn't be a problem, now you realize, no, all 3 of those people need to be lit. And that's a time element. And how many of those are you going to use? And every time I look at the film, I realize that nothing else looks like it. It looks gorgeous, but like you feel the sense that the characters are there, that they're spinning in their own world, that the sweat, the saturation, you feel heat, you feel energy, and that's not just through performance. It's just straight up through photography. And I mean, just recently I was talking to somebody about. I love this moment. Recently, a studio was asking me because we needed to cut like $5 million out of the budget or something like that. And I said, well, I think we should maybe, shoot it on Super 16 millimeter like we did Hustle and Flow. And they were like, "Oh, well, is there a savings for that?" And I go, "Well, I can tell you where the savings is. We just wouldn't have Video Village. We'll just have like what I had on Hustle and Flow, which was like a little monitor the size of my wallet." And you could see the producer's eyes just kind of glazing over, where I'd kind of called them on their bluff a little bit, because now they realize, like, oh, wait a minute, all those things that we love, having like the Video Village and all the chairs, and then somebody, how else are they going to have their latte in the morning unless they have that thing to set their drink on? And I was just like, hey, look at Hustle and Flow. Like, we shot that on 16 millimeter. And it looks better than so much that is out there that has much more money than we did.
I just want to comment on something that Craig said about us working on location. I'm going to encourage you guys to get your locations. I know we're going through everyone's thesis projects and getting them ready for prep so they get ready to shoot. And I'm telling you that time spent on your real locations before you are shooting with actors or stand-ins and your director, you cinematographers, and you directors with your cinematographer working through your shots will not only inspire you, but it will really help you be organized and not be struggling through your blocking. How many of you were in Jonathan's blocking for directors class? A bunch of you? Okay, we're gonna do some work with that class. But another thing that Craig said that I think is really important is that this movie, really, the process of making the movie is exactly what the movie is about. And I think those kind of forces come together very rarely. And there's something really amazing about when the subject matter of a movie is reflected in the process of a movie, then the end product kind of rises to another place. I also am going to say that this movie is somewhat historical in terms of its technology. It was the first Super 16 negative to go to digital intermediate. Walter was fresh in the United States. He came over, I'll let you tell your own story, but he came over from Italy to put in the first digital intermediate rooms at Photochem. That's where we met. And the rest is history. I mean, I haven't done a movie without Walter since Hustle and Flow, if you can believe that. So 18 years of, we called it 20 in the invite, because having your partners and your collaborators is super important. And Walter, when we did our test for this movie, we had to take the material all the way through the post process to know what it was going to look like. And I'll never forget sitting in a theater in Memphis with Craig, and we saw and it was contrasty and it was grainy, and we looked at each other and we said, "Are we going to go for it?" And we said yes, and we never stopped all the way through. And I think
that was actually back in the day where you would go into a movie theater to see what you had shot, and it's not what it is today, which I'm sure a lot of you will now be experiencing in your career, where you're, what's the LUT that's been loaded, you're going to be looking at monitors where you're almost looking at a movie that is deliverable. But this was at a time where it was real photography. I mean, we did not, when we looked at the monitor, we weren't looking at the final image yet. And that, I have to say, I get it. I get, like, Christopher Nolan and everybody, there's something about that magic that I worry that maybe we've lost a little bit of. I like the mystery of it, but still, I was at a screening just recently of They Cloned Tyrone, and Amy, I don't know if you've seen this movie or not, and I just thought it was great, but I went up to the director and he was like, "Oh, Craig, your movie was in our lookbook. We really studied Hustle and tried to get that look, and it's I've heard that from many people, actually, that they've used that they studied Hustle and Flow." And it's so funny because I remember one of my favorite memories is we would go to John Singleton's office in Lemire Park, and he had he had two 35 millimeter projectors. He would project movies, the old school reel changing way, where like the guy would, you have like reel one up on one projector, and then you change to the other projector. And we watched Taxi Driver, and we watched Midnight Cowboy, and I'd have Stephanie on one side of me, I'd have John on one side of me, and we would just be watching these movies, and John would play it so loud. Oh my God. I mean, it was just, it was wild. And then I remember, if you've all seen Taxi Driver, there's this moment where like there's a guy that's robbing a gas station, and then Travis Bickle shoots him in the head. And then he says, "Hey, I don't got a permit for this gun." And then the shop owner goes, "Oh, just go ahead and leave. It's fine." And then he's getting mad at the dead guy on the ground that just robbed him. And he takes a crowbar and he starts beating the dead corpse. And I'll never forget Stephanie on the left side of me just screaming in horror. And John just like joyously screaming. He was like punching me. And I was like the child in between two parents that were just radically different. But that's an exciting part of not only going to your location. And I always tell I remember I just filmed that my 15-year-old daughter and all her 15-year-old friends. I very calmly tried to kind of like come in, give some wisdom, and leave. And one of the things I said was, whenever you go and you make a movie, it's really important to visit your locations. And you're going to be visiting a lot of locations, and your job is to figure out, if this was your location, how would you shoot in it? And I always say, just go stand in the corner where you think that master shot is going to be, and just try to see if you can make this image work. And that's just where the magic occurs, if you ask me.
Okay, more questions from.
I lost just a little bit of that. You're talking about when he's kind of like talking to Skinny Black at the end of the movie, and then what was your question with that?
Like, what kind of cues did you give him, or what kind of conversation did you have with him? With that?
Well, it's interesting you bring up that scene, because I watched a double bill in Chicago at the Music Box Theater this last weekend, where Hustle and Flow was playing with 8 Mile. It was a double feature. And narratively, what you usually have with music or dance movies or anything like that, there's always the big finale, right? Where it's like, even like, I don't know if you've all even seen the movie like Drumline, or like if there's something that involves, or anything like Bring It On. There's going to be that moment at the end of the movie where you've been teasing that Eminem could be good, but it's going to take that finale moment in the third act where you go, oh, there's Eminem, and he's, ripping, Mackie apart. And, it's like, you get that, you see Purple Rain, and you see like, oh, Prince finally embraced his father's music. He finally lets Wendy and Lisa write a song. And look, he's now embracing that, and he's singing Purple Rain, and everybody loves him. Hustle does not do that. Hustle, and this is not something that I did by any sort of smart design. Hustle gives you these musical moments in the middle of the movie where you as a viewer are going like, oh, they're pretty good. So you go into this third act, and you're not necessarily getting the big musical finale. You get a finale where the movie's called Hustle and Flow. So the flow's good. So what's the third act going to be? Well, it's going to be about hustling. And the victory in the third act is, can he tell this rapper that you need to listen to my shit? That you need to like, how are you in a crowded room with a bunch of, people, and make everybody turn their attention to you? And I remember, this is just how good Terrence is. I really believe that Terrence is one of the most intuitive actors of his generation. And what I mean by intuitive is, like, everybody always talks about Marlon Brando being a very intuitive actor, or James Dean. And whenever they talk about Brando, they always talk about like he's in the scene and on the waterfront, and the actress drops her glove, and then Brando picks up the glove and he starts putting on her glove, and that's what intuitiveness is like you take what is around you and you start incorporating it into your performance. And there's a moment that is all about the question earlier about movement. So the most pivotal moment in Act 3 of this pimping moment is when no one's listening to him. And I remember saying like, okay, Terrence, we're going to slightly push in on you. You're going to turn away from this crowd. And I need to see on your face, first of all, that you're scared, that you're nervous. And then I need you to like somehow internalize all of that and then make a decision that you're going to be bold and you're going to go for broke, and you may get your ass whooped and you may get thrown out of this club. But then you need to turn around with the absolute confidence of what kind of hustler you are. And I don't know if you all remember that shot or not, but it's just an amazing moment of like a camera coming in slowly on an actor who has no dialogue and is somehow managing to track all of that. And I hope I'm answering your question, but I mean, it was definitely something that I've been thinking about that whole exchange between him and Ludacris at the end of the movie a lot lately.
Well, Craig, if I may, we also made a purposeful decision to take the camera outside of the circle. If you notice, it's a huge line cross. The camera goes outside the crowd and gives Terrence his private moment by doing that. And then as soon as you cut back in, you're on the right side of the line again. And I think that is just a decision that was made to help support the story with the choice of where to put the camera.
You visually isolate him, not just figuratively, but visually isolate him from the rest.
That was a great question. Sarah.
And by the way, do I remember correctly, he was nominated for an Academy Award, right?
Terrence?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remind him about that whenever he gets a little, yeah. On Empire, whenever we get into it, I'd be like, okay, all right.
Hi, so I have a quick.
I mean, I will definitely come in and tell you some of the perspective on this, but I can't say enough about Stephanie's contribution to so many first-time filmmakers. I first knew about Stephanie because I always tell people, I didn't go to college, I didn't go to film school. I worked at Barnes & Noble. And Barnes & Noble, you got like an extra 5% discount on 30% discounts. And so I would just get all the books that I could on filmmaking. And I got a pretty good career. And it's because you got to have a hunger to go out and get this information yourself, in addition to having really great teachers teach you things. And I had gotten my hands on 2 books that I really still give as gifts today. One is Sidney Lumet's Making Movies, which I learned a lot about how he handles the set and actors. And he brings up iconic moments from Dog Day Afternoon and really breaks down how he shot it and how he talked to the actors. But the other book that I really recommend is this book called Rebel Without a Crew that Robert Rodriguez wrote about him making his first movie for $7,000 called El Mariachi. And I mean, there's a whole chapter in there about him getting the movie to Stephanie Lane at I think you were at Columbia at the time, Stephanie, and she championed getting that movie out. And then, then I learned more about, and it's even more relevant now because, John Singleton worked on Pee-wee's Playhouse, I think, when he was writing his like college dissertation movie, which was Boys in the Hood, that I believe he brought to you over at Columbia. So she has a long, and not to mention Senna Hamry, who she made a movie with and was my producer director on Empire. She's kind of like the director mother to all of us. And it's a very personal, vulnerable position for anybody to be in when you start getting into that level of filmmaking, because you're afraid. There's a lot more people now that are there that you are directly, responsible for them doing their job or they're having a problem. And so Stephanie is probably a good person to talk to about that.
Well, thank you, Craig. I mean, look, I think it is really important to find a producer who believes in you, because at certain points after you've written the script and you prepped your movie and you've thought about it, the materialization, the manifestation of that is part of a process that is going to include a lot of other people. And you just need somebody out there quarterbacking. You need somebody who's like this is the shit. This is what you want, And I've never had a problem selling anything because I believed in it so much. You know what I mean? So I think it's really, passion is the one thing that you really can't buy. You just have to have it. And when you have it for something that you believe in, it is the fuel to wherever you're going, So I will say that I just finished I don't know how many movies I made with first-time directors. I just finished my last one with a first-time director, 47-year-old first-time director. And it was a real joy. It's just such a joy to see people put it together for the first time. Just, like you said, you didn't go to film school. You just had a vision, and you just surround yourself with people who believe in that vision. And I think bringing Amy on so early in our process was so helpful, because you guys got a couple years to think about the movie, think about the shots. I just remembered when you guys were talking that we were like, oh yeah, he could be selling those girls in a cold car. And it's so cold, the heater doesn't work and they're freezing,
You can see their breath, yeah.
Breath.
We can backlight their breath.
We were making this movie no matter what, and God damn it, we did.
I will give you just a little bit of advice that I give first-time filmmakers that are moving into this transition, which is I will never forget. I had lunch with Todd Phillips after Hustle and Flow came out because he was such a big fan of it, and I just started asking him, is this how you direct? And I started just kind of breaking down the day, and he goes, I had the same conversation with Ivan Reitman. I was worried that I wasn't doing it right. But I recommend a couple of things. I recommend that when you're with a big crew, you're going to go on this thing called a locations tech scout. When all the people gather around you, the first, yeah. Can everybody, do you know what I'm going to say? You need to come off sounding really authoritative, like you know what you're talking about. So the first thing out of your mouth you need to say is, what time of day are we here? And it's an important question, because then your DP starts figuring out where the sun's going to be. And then you need to just know that you're going to be probably shooting into the sun, and it just gives you a little bit of agency. The second thing is that I try to show up an hour before my AD gets to set. And the reason I do that is so I can have the set to myself and go through the shots myself, and feel like it's my set before anybody shows up. And then when the AD walks in, I say the same thing every time. I say, where are we on first team? I don't really care where we are on first team. I wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about for a minute, because I was dry heaving earlier that morning because of all the anxiety and all the stress and everything. And I just wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about. And then everybody shows up. It doesn't matter if it's like a new actor or Eddie Murphy or an experienced actor or someone that's new. I say, let's gather in a circle. Let's just go through the lines. And I say, no gas. I don't want to see any acting. Just say the lines. And that somehow decriminalizes the moment with all the actors there and all the crew. And I start figuring out the blocking. And then, I start asking my director of photography, is this working out? Should I move him over here by this window? And then we get into the day. But you will find that transition into professional filmmaking is a little bit difficult, but you'll be able to get it, and just trust that you belong there. I think that's the most important thing, is that you belong there. It's funny because now we're on the strike, and I always kind of bring this up to my daughter and all her friends that want to be writers. I'll never forget driving up to the Black Snake Moan set, and there were all these trailers out and people moving around, and it really hit me. I was like, oh yeah, if I hadn't thought of this movie or tried to make this movie, none of these people would be working right now. And as much as you know that you can't make the movie without them, trust that you belong there. It's going to be a tough transition, but you have a right to be there. It's your work. It's your passion, and it's your film.
Stephanie, I want to ask you something.
The best story I can tell you is actually on the second movie that Amy and I did, called Black Snake Moan. Excuse me. And there's a moment where Sam Jackson's character is going to be introduced into the movie. And we rehearsed this moment where his wife had just been having an affair with his brother, and she's leaving him, and he's about to go in there and confront her. And a friend of his, this preacher, is talking to him, and Sam Jackson's first line, and it's the first line that he's going to have in the movie, he says, I don't know about this, RL. I've never laid a hand on her, not one time, not even when I was drinking, but this here business got me thinking something else, right? And so we rehearsed the scene, and I said, so Sam, instead of looking here, can you look there? And it was like barely a head move. And Sam starts blinking at me, and he's like, why do I gotta look over there? And I said, because this is just, something I want. Can you just look over there? It's like, no, we just rehearsed this thing, and I didn't look over there. I looked over here. And I was like, yeah, but I got this cotton combine, like this big truck way over there, and the Teamster driver is waving to me. And I go, I'm going to follow this cotton combine in, and I'm going to land on you in profile. And I think right now I'm just seeing the back of your ear. So if you could look over there. And he goes, look, let me make this clear. That camera's got fucking wheels on it, and we all just figured out what we're doing here. And you can move that motherfucker wherever you want to capture whatever you want to, but this is what we're doing. And then I started I got trained on with Terrence Howard. So I started giving shit back to Sam. And then Sam said, well, listen, you want to, what's your problem? I go, well, I'm introducing you, and this is the idea that I had for introducing you, and goddamn it, I fucking want it. And he was like, you want to hear an idea that I have for how to do it? And I was like, well, I think I'm going to hear it, so why don't you go ahead and say it? And he goes, okay, look. And he showed me that he had the makeup artist put a scar on his hand. And he goes, look, I got a scar on my hand, and look, you see the wedding ring on it, and I'm gonna put a cigarette in it. And he goes, now watch this. And he bows his head, and he kind of puts his hands together, and he slowly lifts his head up. And I don't know how he did this, but I swear to you, the wind changed, and the cigarette smoke cut across his eyes as he just looked up at the spot and said, I never laid a hand on her not one time, RL, not even when I was drinking, but this here business got me thinking something else. And I was like, fine, shoot it, whatever. And so we shoot it, and it's perfect because he looks like he's praying. And I was thinking to myself, as I'm shooting, it's like, oh God, that cotton combine was just fucking dumb, Craig. Why did you even think about that? And you're arguing with this man who's made 90 movies, and he so obviously just gave you a much better shot. And I could hear my dad, who had passed, in my head just going you got schooled. And it was a very dramatic moment where Sam is he's going back into his van to go back to camp, and the door of the van is closing, and I gripped it and ripped it open. I looked at him, and I was just like, Sam, that was really good, and I'm glad you spoke up. And he goes, hey man, we're just trying to each one of us bring our own thing. So I understand what it is to have an ego, but I think we're all a little bit wrong I know there's directors out there that are my way or the highway, but there is not a greater fear than you can have of like you throwing a tantrum to get what you want and it's mid. It's mediocre. It wasn't good. Now, music producers that I respect, from Sam Phillips, who broke Elvis and Johnny Cash and B.B. King, to music producers that were doing Stax records with Otis Redding and Sam and Dave, they believed in that electricity right there in the moment with the musicians that you had, and you had to kind of harness that energy. And that requires an egoless self. That requires more of a parent going like, hey, can you maybe not make that solo so complicated? And hey, drummer, can you maybe put a little more sex in it? You're not being specific as to what you want, but you're trying to like get the best out of them. And yeah, I can tell you plenty of stories where egos rage on sets, but I would just say I have learned more and more that my job is not as a director. I'm just wrangling talent, and sometimes you got to just let people beat up on you, especially actors, because we expect a lot from them. We really do. It's I hate, I don't know about you, I'm kind of chubby, and so when people take my picture, I'm always pulling my shirt out so my gut doesn't look as big as it does. Imagine 24 frames a second, 24 pictures a second, and it's forever. So we ask a lot of them, and they need to feel comfortable. And if they got to throw a tantrum, then they throw a tantrum. But they know they can trust you.
Thank you so much.
And
when I'm writing the movie, I have these index cards that I write it out on. I believe in playlists before there were playlists. I'm of the mixtape generation, so I remember the first time I heard the song "Baby Please Don't Leave Me" by Buddy Guy on Sweet Tea. I was like, I'm gonna open my movie with this song, and I did. And I remember driving in my car here in Memphis. And listening to Al Green, and he has the song "Jesus Is Waiting," and I was like, that's going to be when he gives Skinny Black that tape. The interesting thing about this movie, though, is that it was kind of like a musical. I mean, it's not like Judy Garland type of musical, but you did have to make some original songs, and to me, that's the exciting part. I mean, getting with these these rap producers who not only just have to make a beat and a hook, but they've got to flow. They've got to create flow that is narratively a part of it. So as Stephanie will tell you, when we were going around town trying to sell it, I got better at pitching in the room, right? And that's part of the thing that unfortunately as a director you have to do, is that you do have to be a bit of a salesman. And to be honest with you, it's not necessarily fair. And that's why I would say, like, the best thing you can all do is just start making your own movies that are undeniable, even if they're just like 5 minutes long, because then they'll listen to you in that room and they're not just listening to somebody who's saying all the buzzwords, right? But I would go into the room sometimes, and I remember being at MTV Films when there was a moment where they were thinking about doing it, and then they passed on it, and then later bought it for 5 times more at Sundance. But I was talking a lot about Amadeus. And I don't know if you've all seen Amadeus, but if you haven't, you should fix that problem. Unfortunately, you're probably going to have to get the Blu-ray with it, which is the director's cut. I would recommend getting the DVD. I know, but it's the original theatrical cut, and it's better. I'll get off my soapbox there. But Amadeus was a movie that I saw when I was 12, and as much as I loved like John Williams scores, I wasn't really like a big classical person. But watching that movie made me suddenly a fan of classical music, because in the final act of the movie, Mozart is dying and he's writing his Requiem Mass, and Salieri, the lead of the movie, is transcribing what Mozart is saying line by line. And for the first time ever, I could see how classical music was constructed. I could see that, like, oh, here's the violins are rising here. Here's the bass and bassoon part. Oh, here's what the sopranos are going to be singing. Here's what the bass and the tenors are going to be singing. And then you would hear it all put together. And I just remember getting chills when I was like 12, when I would suddenly see it all put together, having gone through and heard all the individual parts of it. And I knew that if we could somehow do that for rap, that the movie would transcend it just being a quote unquote like rap movie, because there was a lot of people that passed on the movie because they were like, we're not into rap. And also you're trying to do this thing called Southern rap, and that's not going to last. And I knew that if we somehow could show the audience the love and detail that went into everything, and then suddenly they saw it happen, that push in on Suge hearing herself in the music for the first time, that they would then own the music. They would own it because they watched it being birthed and being raised essentially right there in front of them. I remember when we got nominated for Best Song for an Academy Award, I was very confident that we won it. And they were like, Craig, there's just no way. First of all, you're not going to beat Dolly Parton. And you're not going to beat her with a song called How It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. And I was like, no, if they voted for it, that means they remembered it, and they were there when that song was born, and they couldn't get it out of their head, and the movie wouldn't have worked without that song. And really, that's keeping an open mind to the movies that you see, and that I got from Amadeus.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Obviously, especially with this group, about photography. But man, production design and costumes are like, I can't, it's like it's been that thing that has always been there that I never quite realized, like, until you start making things where sometimes they're all at odds, we're like, oh, I don't know if that lighting really helped with that costume or that location or that set. Like, I don't know if we were all making the same movie there, so I would say that with all the discussion of color, Memphis kind of provided a lot of that. We only built one set. We only built the interior of that house. Otherwise, that, the world we were in was kind of the world that Amy and I were viewing through her old school viewfinder. You know what I mean? Like that's the color.
And the jail.
Yes, we did have to build the jail as our traveling set.
I'll tell you guys that story another time. So speaking of props, I know Ishank has a pressing question, but Craig, I have to ask you, are you wearing your father's watch?
I am. This is the watch that's in Hustle and Flow.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that, and oh wait, hang on one second.
He's gonna get the chain.
He's gonna get it.
So this is the keyboard that the DJ gets sold, and I keep it with me as much as I can. And I also have a lot of the CDs with Skinny Black. And just to give you a little bit of a story about that, when I was writing Hustle and Flow, it was right when the album Back for the First Time came out, with Ludacris's first album. And he's in kind of like what's the new PC word for wife beater shirt? Like the kind of the undershirt, with the straps and everything like that. And he's got like these cornrows in, and he's on this porch, and he's just kind of looking at the camera. And so when I was writing Hustle and Flow, I would tape the insert of the CD onto my computer screen, and I would write Hustle and Flow, thinking like, well, maybe Ludacris could be DJ, or maybe I can, it was back when Southern rap was not as prevalent as it is now, and accepted as it is now, and truly where a lot of hip hop is right now. But I found it so funny that, years later, Ludacris played, the guy that DJ takes that same CD insert and staples it to his workstation, just like I did with him, when I was writing it. So yeah, this is the watch that my dad got for 25 years of working for a company in shipping. And that's what that whole monologue is, with him talking about whenever he worked for a company called Matson Navigation, and I sometimes see the containers everywhere, and I'll say to whoever's with me, "It's oh, my dad used to work for that company," and that's where that monologue came from, So my dad never got to see any of my success; he just got to inspire it, and then. So I always tell people it's like he left this planet the best way a father could by saying, "Don't be afraid and get out there and try to make your movie and don't apologize if you don't have any money. Celebrate the fact that you don't have any money." And I'm a parent now, and I just make sure that I'm not saying something like, "All right, don't do something stupid out there." I try to you never know when you're going to leave this planet, and he did it so perfectly. So. I'm wearing the watch, and we've still got some more work to do.
That would be a beautiful way.
Well, I edited my first film, and then I haven't edited any of the movies that I've done. I mean, I've had Billy Fox, who's been my editorial collaborator, and he knows a lot about post as well. But that's another one of those things about being precious, right? So I can go into something knowing how I'm going to cut something. As you all know, they call it the editor's edit or the assemble edit, and that's always a bit of a transition because you've been watching dailies, and the movie is still kind of magical in your brain, and then your editor puts it all together. And then you cry. And that's what I did on Olympic Boulevard after I saw the Hustle and Flow edit. I pulled over to the side of the road and I just sobbed. I'm talking like snot, ugly cry. But luckily I had two good producers that had been through this process many times with other directors saying you gotta work on it now. Now's the time for you to cut it together, and you're gonna find its rhythm, and you find a whole other movie. And more and more what I'm trying to do, and I have to say, television kind of got me thinking more like this, is to allow the editor some space to try to shake up a little bit of what you thought it should be. So I think it's very important for you to go in, to be thinking about your edit. And then there's a really good book, that Stephen King wrote called Stephen King on Writing. And he gives this really great bit of advice from one of his newspaper editors that said, do your first draft with the door closed and do your second draft with the door open. And I think that's really good for a lot of things in movies and in life. You're telling the story to you first. And then there comes a moment where you've now got to open up your world and allow a lot more people in. And that's when the real work comes in. And sometimes for me, I kind of view it as okay, there's the movie that I saw and that I tried to go out and make. But now it's like a child. It's okay, well, now this person's going to be its own person. All right, I wanted him to go to medical school. He doesn't want to do it. He's an artist. And how do I start just bending more towards this child, this human being, than I am that I'm trying to wrestle it to what I thought it should be. And that's, I think, hard for first-time filmmakers to allow to have happen, but you have to trust the process. You have to be patient. I'll tell you just one last little story about post for our friend, the late John Singleton. Stephanie showed the movie to a friend of both of us, Senna Hamry, who later became my boss on Empire, who I love dearly and is very talented. And Stephanie was making a movie with Senna. What's the name of the movie? Something New. And so she showed the movie to Senna, and it was in its first edit, right? I mean, we were still working with it. And Senna said, I think that I think by the time you get to the third song, we're kind of over it, Yeah, I think it's just I'm losing interest there. It's getting a little bit boring. And so I'm driving home, and I'm about to have my cry on Olympic Boulevard. And John Singleton calls me, so excited. And he's like, "Hey, you got to go to Virgin." And I don't know if any of you remember Virgin, but that's where, we used to get DVDs. And he said, Purple Rain there's a new DVD of Purple Rain out, and it's got commentary on it. You got to see it. And he knew that I loved it. And so I went home and I went to Virgin. I got Purple Rain, and then I watched it, and I love the movie. It's my island movie. Like if I was locked on an island somewhere, that's the movie that I would watch. But I'm watching it as a filmmaker for the first time, and I noticed that if you watch this one sequence with when Dove's Cry is playing, the editing is just so unique because you're seeing scenes that you've seen, but now you're seeing scenes that you haven't seen that took place at the location of scenes you've seen. So you're kind of I'm kind of going like, oh, I bet that scene got cut. But now it's part of this process. And now Prince is walking around in his high heels and kind of sad about his girlfriend Apollonia and everything. And now it kind of works in a different way. And so I went back to my editor the next day and I was like, I think I know what to do about that third song. Let's take the second verse out and just keep it instrumental. And then we're going to go back and we're going to remind everybody that the third act is all about getting this tape to Skinny Black. And let's start going to this scene over here where Isaac Hayes says, "Oh, you know Skinny Black," and then we'll cut to like that scene that we had to cut of Anthony Anderson going, "Do you really know who Skinny Black is?" So again, like that's that process where it's like you think like, oh, I never thought about that when I was making the movie, but now because I'm depressed because Stephanie showed the movie to another filmmaker who had this thing that's now in my head, and then I have another filmmaker, my hero John Singleton, saying like, "Oh man, don't even think about your movie. Purple Rain came out on DVD. You got to watch it." And then suddenly like it gives me this new idea. That's cinema. When everybody talks about like what cinema is, it's not like, is it a movie you can eat popcorn in or not? It's like, are you kind of like Stephanie always says this term, being in the flow of grace? Like, are you wrestling with what's wrong and new ideas that are right and just trying to like put it all into this thing and then move it forward? That's really what cinema is. That's when you're in that flow of grace making it. And sometimes things that are bad end up being good. And I also recommend you all watch Purple Rain because it's great cinema.
I love you, Craig. I love you, Amy.
I love you both. If our Zoom is